I've been an operator most of my life and best known for the kid that took a $200K line of credit and built a $20 million portfolio. I bought the old trusted get rich slow scheme, which is real estate. I'm in tears and I'm just like, I think I'm going to have to get a job. I'm a multimillionaire and I'm watching my equity go up and my cash is literally going to zero. What a lot of people think is that you have to have money to invest in real estate, and you don't. You just have to be resourceful. I said, Mom and Dad, would you let me take a line of credit on your house and use it for this real estate thing? And they said no. And so 9 months later of me educating, me buying my own duplex with my own money and going to meetups and educating them, they finally said, okay, we'll try one. In 2022, I passed out 4 times from stress. I can't compete with my morality.
All right, Wyatt Simon, I'm super excited about this conversation because we are in sort of these similar but slightly different worlds where I am trying to figure out how to build stuff and you own real estate, you manage, you fundraise for it, and you don't touch construction. So let's see how we can figure out how your world touches mine and how my world touches yours.
That sounds good. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to touch construction. We'll say that. Know anything about development. I've been an operator most of my life and known for the kid that took a $200K line of credit and built a $20 million portfolio. But when it comes to new construction, man, that is a new world. We'll say that.
And maybe you are the smarter one in the room because it is risky. It does take a lot of money and time, and your mistakes cost you a lot of money. So maybe you took the safer route. But tell me, it sounds exciting from $200,000 and then you blew it up. What did you do? Did you buy Bitcoin or?
No, I bought real estate. Yeah. I bought the old trusted get rich slow scheme, which is real estate. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the Purple Bible, right? And wanted to buy assets. Like that book taught me, buy assets, let them work for you while you sleep. So naturally, I gravitated to real estate. I failed at my first job out of college. I worked for a home buying company in Colorado. They were buying about 25 houses a month, and I bought about 3 in 9 months and was not cutting it. So that opened up my world to this real estate thing. It's just I had no skills and didn't know how to do anything. And so eventually had to take another job and get better and add to my skill set and then start buying houses and on the side until it became a full-time gig, and then moved into apartments and then moved into hard money lending and systemized property management, and now coaching other investors on how to scale and put in systems. So that's the long and short.
Interesting. So transitioning from single family to multifamily, what was that like?
Well, at the time, it was in 2021 is when I bought my first multifamily. So that was when interest rates were dropping and you could buy anything and you'd just be a genius, right? So I bought multifamily. I would say it was scary because, I bought a 12 unit, I bought a 4 unit, I bought a 9 unit, I bought a 23 unit without much coaching, right? Without just kind of doing it on my own, figuring out what I could. And I could tell you stories of $1 million opportunities I missed before that on multifamily deals that legitimately, I missed out anyways. But eventually 2 years later, I was able to take action through self-education. Once I got into it, I quit my job and started a property management company when I got to 76 units. And it was at that time I was like, wow, I really don't know how to do a management company. So I bought into coaching and it helped me just scale faster. I guess it was just bigger numbers, as you said, mistakes were larger. I did not have good books. And so that was a huge thing of learning how to keep good books. And I outgrew my first bookkeeper and then hired a second one, and the second one wasn't qualified. So I fired them and hired a third one, and the third one wasn't qualified or didn't do a good job. And, we found that out 6 months later because everything's in arrears. And so it was just unwinding that mess. I spent about 33 grand in books just to have them have to get redone. And So all the learning lessons of building and becoming an operator. But overall, I'd say, yeah, multifamily was good until it wasn't. So back in 2021, 22, it was good. 23, it got pretty tough. And that was when I then pivoted back into single family at the beginning of 24 and never looking back.
The single family market is what you think is going to be prevailing in the next few years?
Well, for me, I had, I'll share this story with you. So at the beginning of 2024, right, I'm a multifamily operator. I have 185 units. I've got a $20 million real estate portfolio. I'm telling myself I'm this, success story and I'm this guy and, I made it. But in all reality, I'm in my living room with my wife, January in 2024, and I'm in tears. And I'm just like, I think I'm going to have to get a job. Like, I'm a multimillionaire and I'm watching my equity go up and my cash is literally going to zero. And so I'm sitting there watching no cash come in the door because because I wasn't operating as good as I could have been, and because of all the other things that happened with inflation and operating costs. But then it was in that moment, it was like, okay, well, we have to figure out a cash source, right? And so at that point, it was like, well, I had this home buying company. Let's try that again. And so I started buying houses again, switched from multifamily, where I could not find any deals that penciled anymore, and I wasn't going to buy a bad deal, to then go back into single family. And we started flipping and wholesaling houses and keeping some of the ones that we want. And it worked out very well.
That's a great pivot. So what I would like to understand, and I'm hoping the listeners would like that as well, is when you are just getting started, and so you got your $200,000, put it on a credit card in air quotes, right? Does that buy you a house? What do you do with that?
So I had to get scrappy, right? I read Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was very young. I didn't have money, negative net worth. And so what a lot of people think is that you have to have money to invest in real estate, and you don't. Right. And so even if I'm assuming to develop, you actually don't have to have a ton of money. You just have to be resourceful. You have to be able to put deals together through other people's capital and bank financing, right? And the mixing of pairing those, right? And so when I was starting out, I was doing such a lower level than you are with development, right? But what I did is I found a house that looked good, and I didn't have the money, but my parents, they didn't have the money, but they had their house paid off in cash. So I said, Mom and Dad, would you let me take a line of credit on your house and use it for this real estate thing? And they said no. And so 9 months later of me buying my own duplex with my own money and going to meetups and educating them, they finally said, okay, we'll try one. And that was when I bought a property with their line of credit. So pulled on their line of credit, bought the property, bought it cash, did the renovation. And then I refinanced that property because the value went up. I refinanced that property out and gave them their capital back. And then at that point, I had a house that I picked up for quote unquote free because I had no money into it, that had a tenant in there. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is my ticket. This is the strategy. And for those of you listening, it's called the BRRRR strategy: buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat.
That's right. Yeah, real estate development is somewhat similar, right? You could get into it without really having much. Well, you need the dirt, and you need to have a vision to build something on it. And then, yes, it's access to capital. In my company, what we do is we partner with property owners. So if somebody has a piece of land, they come to us and they say, we've got this land, we think you could build something here. Maybe it's a house, maybe it's a duplex, maybe it's a townhome community, maybe it's a high rise. And either they don't want to do it in themselves, or they don't know how to do it, or they've never done it before. And it's funny, I see people divided into two major camps. One camp thinks, oh, super easy. I'll just hire a bunch of people. I'll draw up a set of plans. I'll bring a contractor and we'll build a tower. And then this other camp thinks, that this is worse than rocket science, that they'd never be able to comprehend all of this, and it's so risky and it's so impossible, and they would never touch it, and they would rather sell the land. So we're here to kind of bridge the gap between the two extremes. It is doable when you know what you're doing, but it's also super risky. But then the question is, how do you finance it, right? And there's all of these strategies. Yes, maybe you could borrow some money from friends and family. Maybe you could convince them to invest with you. But ultimately, if you have access to some investable cash and you've never done it before, they will likely not trust you to manage that investment because you've never done this particular project, right? Whether it's acquisition that you were describing or a new development. New development is basically the same thing, but riskier because there's more variables. More things could go wrong. First of all, it takes long from the time you decide to do a project to the time you get it designed, to the time you get it permitted. In our area, in the Seattle area, it could easily take 18 months just to get your permit. And then if you're building a multifamily, that's 18 to 24 months. So you're looking at 3 to 4 years from the day you start until the building's finished. And all sorts of things can go wrong. And I forget how I got on this tangent.
And you've got a burn rate too, because if you're borrowing bank money, then are you borrowing bank money when you're doing development?
Well, so there are different ways of doing this. And I was just having this conversation this morning with the property owner. You could borrow when you have nothing and you just have a piece of land or maybe an old tear down that you inherited from your grandma. As long as there's no current debt or this debt is refinanceable, you could borrow against it. It's not without risk because let's say you get an 18-month, 2-year line of credit secured by this land to finance your early development work. There are many lenders that would give you fairly easily 50% of the value. Your risk is, what if you don't have an exit plan formulated within that period of time? You're paying interest, you have your overhead because you need to feed yourself. And I would always advise all developers to have a fee that they pay to themselves to make sure that they have bills to pay. They can't just wait until the job's done because they might wait for a long time. So when you burn all this cash that you borrowed, you need to have this exit. And so by then, you either need to have building designed and have your construction loan teed up to refinance the land loan, have your additional equity secured so that you had enough equity for that construction loan to kick in, or put the property on the market and make sure that it sells for more than what you owe. So if you have access to equity before you start construction, that's always better. It's always better to finance the early development efforts using equity rather than debt. So you learned how to rehab, rent out. Were all the properties rental, or were some of them just direct flips that you would rehab and sell?
Yeah. I mean, in the beginning, it was anything I could do and I would exit however I could. I always wanted to do BRRRRs, the rentals. However, there were sometimes it wouldn't BRRRR out correctly. Right. So I couldn't refinance all of my capital out, and it wasn't my capital. Right. So it was debt so I had to be able to refinance all the debt that I had. So therefore I would do flips. Not everyone went well. Like my third property ever, I lost $68,000 on. And so it was at that point I was like, dude, this is, and 11 months of my life, right? Like it was like every day after work, I am stressing about this stupid property. It was at that point I was like, okay, something's got to change. And I was tired of moving so slow. And that's where I see a lot of people just move slow that are getting into real estate. Maybe if I could do like 1 or 2 a year. It's like, as soon as what I did is I hired a coach. And so I hired a coach. The next year, I bought 25 houses while working a full-time job and really started to scale the portfolio that way. And yeah. And then from there, I got a coach for multifamily, got into multifamily, scaled that, got a coach for property management, built systems. And then, yeah, now I have a coach for media. So we're working on that right now. And
Nice.
at this point, just continuing to pay the learning curve with money instead of time.
When you were working on these jobs, did you have any income? Well, you had a full-time job at the time, but then when you quit your full-time job, did you program some sort of an overhead payment, some sort of a paycheck to yourself?
I did. The problem,
Okay.
the properties weren't performing like we pro forma'd them to be. And so then I hopped in to start a management company to save operations, and simultaneously inflation hit, right? Like there was a lot of operating costs that jumped up during 2020, 2021, 22. That did not quite jump up as much as the rents that we prorated or, performed. So it was just a tough time. And that was why in 2024, I was like, something's got to change. And, a lot of syndicators, I've syndicated one deal, but a lot of syndicators, they eat based on the acquisition fee that they get. And then they get paid real good in the back end. Right. But it's like the back end is how long, for development, you mentioned it's, at least 3 years, probably longer. Right. And so
Right.
you got to have cash coming in the door. And so what we did is we started a home buying company again. And then now our equity in our portfolio has gotten large. And now we're lending on the equity that we have in our portfolio and hard money lending. And just really had to switch to cash coming in the door instead of not.
Mhm. Yeah, I get it. Tell me about property management. We've talked about property management for a long time. And every time we do a new project, we bring in a third-party property management firm. And the reason we do is I look at the numbers and I just cannot justify taking on this additional hassle of managing this property for only 3% that these guys are making. And so last time I looked at the model, I'm like, it's not worth it. These guys already have their systems dialed down. They get their recruiting, they get their advertising, they get bulk rates because they have multiple properties. If they need to advertise when they do their buys with apartment.com or, wherever, Zillow or Google. For me to start from scratch and competing with them, I'm going to be paying a lot more in all these things. How did you justify it? Why did you decide to start managing your properties yourself versus having somebody else do it?
Well, first off, you're right. It's not worth it. And most people should not do it ever. It's simply not worth it. Okay. The reason why I did it is I had raised capital. I had I owned about 60% of my portfolio, right, at the time. And so I had raised capital from 2 other partners in 2 different entities. And some assets were not going according to my plan that I raised the capital at. Right. And so we fired the first property manager that was not doing well. And we hired the second one. And then the second one was not doing well. And so it was at that point I had to look myself in the eyes and say, okay, like, did I buy this incorrectly or was it the property manager? And I said, I'm going to take full responsibility. And I started the property management company to jump in and take over, which we did. And man, it was a very difficult journey. I quit a very high paying W-2 job and started working double the amount of hours for like an tenth of the pay. And I would not recommend it to anyone. The only reason I would ever recommend anyone starting a property management company is if you're going to be regional in the same area for the next 30 years and you're going to grow to 500 plus. That is like the only time I ever tell anyone to vertically integrate anymore. Cause it was not worth the heartache.
500 plus communities or units?
Yours. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have very similar experience with construction. I grew up in a construction family. My father was a general contractor. And when I joined the company, we were primarily a construction company that started doing development sort of on the side. Last year, we officially shut down the construction division because it was taking so much more time and energy in managing construction operations that it was just not worth it. And the profits we didn't make any profits in the last few years, but even the paper profits that we're looking at, I'm like, I'd rather let somebody else make that if they can do it more efficiently, but I don't need the headache.
Yeah. I get it, man. I get it. It was my Have you ever read The E-Myth by Michael Gerber?
No, I haven't.
Okay, great book. I would recommend. He talks about in every business, there's three roles. So there's the entrepreneur, the person that, really says they start the business. They're the high 30,000 foot view person. You got the manager and you got the technician. So the technicians are the ones that are actually doing the sales, doing the work, doing the labor, handling the office administrative tasks. Then you got the managers that are managing the technicians, and you got the entrepreneur at the top. Now, the reason I say that is because we were talking about property management. I was always an entrepreneur. I was always wanting to do things and start things, and I had a home buying company on the side. I was a technician when it came to a salesman. I worked for sales for a foundation company. I did very, very well. I became the top in not only the company, but the network. And so did very well in that role. But I quit my job to start a management company and hire employees in property management. And I became a manager. And that was the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. In 2022, I passed out 4 times from stress because I did not know how to check out from work because I didn't have the right people here and I didn't know how to build systems. And so it was just like, it was awful and stressful. And the doctor literally said, "Hey, you got to figure something out here." It's like, because it's all stress driven was what he told me. And so it was that I hired a coach at that point. But the reason I tell you that story is because property management was my tuition to how to build a business. And so I learned how to build systems. And at this point, I literally go to one meeting for an hour every single week for my management company. And at this point, I'm training the director on how to run that meeting. So I'm not even running it. I'm just giving him feedback. But that's to the level of where I'm at within that company now. And it's been so freeing being able to understand how to do that. The problem was I did it in a business with no money. Property management sucks, dude. So now I'm doing that in our home buying company, in our hard money lending company, and in my coaching company. And it's been really cool. We're once you know how to build systems, then you can take that into a much better market, like I'm sure you have with development here.
Oh yeah, no, I'm a big fan of EOS. We've been trying to, it's almost possible to fully implement EOS. You know what I'm talking about?
Action, baby.
Yeah.
Yep,
exactly. But it's funny, most business owners I talk to, they use some parts of it, but I've never met anyone who uses the entire model. But it's, it's fun. I like it.
Yeah. The company I worked for is doing 100 million a year and they ran everything on traction. So they actually had the softwares and everything. And I worked for them years and really wet my beak and found I enjoyed the process. And to your point, I do my own variation of it now with my company.
Yeah. No, it's funny because, obviously they sell their what do they call them? Implementors? Implementation advisors, coaches, and it takes so much time. And after a while, paying the consultant, you're like, anyways, I got it. Just get out of here. We'll take it from here.
Yeah, I hear you. One of my good buddies is in the US, implementer. But yeah. Ironically, he was the general manager at the old company.
Right. Yeah. How was the syndication for you? You said you've done it once. Was it recently, or why only once?
Yeah, good question. So we closed on a 36 unit apartment complex in 2022. And just looking back, it's gone very well. I will say this is one of our best performing properties that we have in our portfolio. We are ahead of target, right? We have overperformed pro forma, which is great. We've got a lot of happy investors. I'm just going to let you, just man to man. It was so much work to set up and operate and asset manage this thing for the equity that I have within it. I could have bought 4 houses in 4 months and had the same capital return in my pocket compared to me operating this thing for the last 2 years to have all of my investors be incredibly happy. And so at this point, I just have to look at return on time and just be like, okay, if there were more deals like that and I could systemize everything to do it, I would do that. But the problem is there's syndicators in my market that are well overpaying for assets. I will just say that. Like I've seen some really sketchy stuff where like a guy in my market literally had a blind pool fund, and he bought a property from me. I wholesaled it to him. He then charged a $500,000 wholesale assignment fee to his blind pool fund to then take over, that his blind pool fund has no idea, right? Like just crazy, sketchy, bad things of people that are overpaying in this market. And it's like, I can't compete with my morality. Like,
and why would you?
So can't beat them.
So the time consuming part, was that, was it the fundraising part that was time consuming, or was that actually managing the asset that took too much time?
Yeah, just managing the asset in general. Like all of I my whole life has done value add properties. So mismanaged, heavier lifts. And so we have come in and completely turned the entire tenant base, every single, I think there's 4 residents of the 36 left there at this point. And we've renovated every single unit in the hallways and just, everything. And so managing all of those contractors, managing every single individual thing, and building the property management company within while I'm doing that, it was a lot. And yeah, at this point, I mean, we could have just take it down ourselves, and we raised, I don't know, 900,000, which me and my partner could just do now. Right.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So the funds that, when you were saying you have a debt fund that you could have financed it yourself, that's your basically own earnings and savings that you put away into this fund, or are you still working with outside investors?
So I am working with outside investors, and I don't have a fund. The way I'm working with outside investors currently is I have you could think of it as like a debt fund. We don't have it in a fund structure. It's, I have a private money lending or hard money lending business. And I've got a lot of people in my market that are flippers. Some of them are like my mentees that are making $1 million a year flipping houses, but they have a credit line of $1 million and they have a flip that they've got 3 other flips. Their credit line's full. They borrow from me at 18%. I fund their deal, and then they go out there and make 60 grand on it. So we've got flippers in our market locally that we're financing. And I have so much demand for flippers in my market that we are now raising capital to help source the capital for the flippers. Right. And so, right now, our minimum investment's 50, we're paying 8%. If you're doing 100 or over, then we're paying 10% direct deposit every single month into the bank account. Right now we're doing a round for the next 3 weeks on that. Because we're, again, sourcing capital for the next 3 weeks. We'll probably do it again another 4 months, just as demand continues to increase.
Okay. How do you source capital? Do you go back to your existing pool of investors, or do you go outside? How do you market it?
Yeah, so far it's been, friends and family, just everybody I've interacted with, different masterminds, network. Haven't had any family offices yet, but let me ask you this. How do you source capital? Yeah. What have you found that's best?
So it's funny, for the last 20 years, we never worked with retail investors. We would normally partner with a property owner, and there would be enough equity in the land. And then we would bring in additional, either our own family office would supplement the capital, or we would come up with some creative financing structure. Like in one case, we split up the townhome development in 2 phases. We had a construction loan for phase 1 that covered construction of there's 4 buildings, I think. It covered construction of the first building. And that's what the bank underwrote, is that we're only borrowing the money for the first building. Well, what we included in the budget was construction work to clear the entire site and put foundations on all of the buildings. And I think even some of the framing that would go into some of the other buildings. It was all rolled into this one loan. And so the bank was financing the draws. We were building the first building. While we're building it, we put the units on the market. We were able to pre-sell the entire community in 4 months. And so after that was done, we came back to the bank and said, look, why don't we refinance this right away with you guys? Give us the loan for the entire development because it's all pre-sold. There's very little risk. And so they went ahead with that. We didn't need additional equity because of that structure. One other deal that actually didn't work out that well, we got a ground lease financing. So we sold the dirt from under the building to a ground lease company that paid us cash, and then we got a 100-year ground lease and then got a construction loan to finance the building construction. So that supplemented the equity. In the last 2 years, I started working with syndicators and learning that market and participating in masterminds and kind of learned this whole structure. So we recently announced the launch of retail funds, two separate funds, one focusing on distressed assets. That would be our first time acquiring existing assets. The idea there is that there's a lot of multifamily and single-family projects that are in good condition. They're brand new. They just got built, but they simply don't have enough cash to refinance because interest rates shot up. They either need additional equity or they need to liquidate, but prices dropped, and so they're having to sell at a discount. So the play there is to acquire these assets at deep discounts. We are working with original sponsors to keep them in the deal, obviously with a substantial discount to make it worthwhile to the investors, and acquiring assets cleanly with no lawsuits, no liens or anything like that. So that's one thing. We just announced it recently, still in the early stages. And then another fund that we've announced is what we call a GP fund. So kind of playing on this whole general partnership, limited partnership structure. This is a fund. Investors are actually going to be limited partners, but we call it a GP fund because it will finance early development stages for projects. So instead of getting a bank loan to go through the early development stages, we're bringing in limited partners to finance early development stages of projects. And then at a later stage, we'll open it up to the LP fund, which is going to be more or less traditional limited partners. And then our future plans are to have a debt fund to also fund, the actual loan, and also a KP fund, where it would be a dedicated set of cash sitting on the sidelines specifically to provide loan guarantees to some of the projects in exchange for a share of those properties. So that cash is actually most secure because it's just sitting in the bank account earning, whatever minimum treasury interest, but then it has a huge upside when the project's finished. So that's kind of our plan moving forward, and continue doubling down on our partnership model to enable property owners get their stuff, get their projects developed.
Yeah, I love the big picture. I mean, that is clearly spelled out. How long have you been executing towards this, or is this a more recent picture development?
So it's been in conception, I guess, over the last 12 months. I studied a lot on that, spent some money on coaching, mastermind programs, time traveling. I've worked with syndicators to observe how they work. And implementation started about, I would say, second half of last year. And we were heavy on marketing. Part of that reason we started this podcast is because we wanted to educate the wannabe developers about how this world operates and how this is done, and also, develop some trust so that people got to know me, our company, and know that we're not some crooks and we're real people.
Yeah. Brilliant. Awareness is growing the
Yeah.
awareness, right? To be able to then help more
Exactly.
people. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was going to say one thing that someone told me in my first mastermind I ever joined back when I was buying houses, and still do buy houses, but they said, whatever you do, just post every time you get a deal. And I'm so glad that they told me that, because I just started posting. Every time I got a contract, I would post on social. And I was the guy that was like, dude, social media is for like girls. You know what I mean? Like I was like,
Right.
whatever, back in the day. And eventually I just started, okay, so I'll post when I get a contract, and then I post when I closed, and then I post the renovation. Then I posted when it was rented, right? And it was like 4 posts. Well, that's cool when you buy 1 deal a year or 2 deals a year. I started buying 3 to 5 houses a month, right? And I'm working at my full-time job, and I would just post. I would just post every time. And I started to get known as this like, well, okay, Wyatt's the real estate guy. Right. And so then it just started to grow in the market.
Yep.
And so when the time came that I had a multifamily opportunity, people had seen, well, this guy bought like 50 houses. Right. So I had the track record to show the state experience, then be able to raise capital for the multifamily. And then after
Right.
that, it led, one thing led into another. And so raising capital has never been, I'd say, too difficult for me. I also haven't raised a ton. I've probably raised about $2 million in my career of real estate raising, but in the last 2 years. So,
Interesting. What motivated you to write a book?
well, I had so many people locally in my market that was just like, okay, Wyatt, how'd you do this? Like, how'd you do this? How'd you do this? And so eventually I got tired. I was like, I can't have this many copies. It's just not going to happen. I don't want to pick my brain this many times. So that was when I was like, okay, I'm going to streamline this. I'm going to download everything that I've learned through all the masterminds, all the private education, all the school of hard knocks, and I just put it into a book. So your first 100 units, the real estate investor's playbook to scaling a rental portfolio. And I broke it down into 3 sections. So how to buy real estate, how to systemize real estate, and how to scale real estate. Right. So whether you're a newbie that's never started, it's all in there for how to start. And then if you're more experienced and you're like I was when I quit my full-time job and I had 70 units, but I did not know how to scale it. It was just like chicken with my head cut off, so much crap going on. It's how to build systems. And then at that point, it's about, okay, how do you create funds? How do you create entities? How do you scale if you really want to go for the scale route? So,
I love it. How long did it take you to write it?
dude, I did it the wrong way. Okay. I did it the old school way on a bench. It took me 3 weeks of my life just typing away, really thinking through concepts and putting my heart and soul into it. And then, I hear some of my peer groups are just like, oh yeah, it took me like 4 hours to write a book because I just chat GPT'd it. I'm like, oh. So yeah, it took me 3 weeks to do it the old school way.
Right. Yeah, I actually had this idea of writing a real estate development manual, basically a how-to, and put together an outline that was back in, I want to say September. And I'm up to chapter 4, I think, but I'm going so much detail. Basically what happens is once a week, I would go on a long, like hour and a half walk, and I would record me just narrating. And then I would use the script, the same platform we're using right now, import it there, it transcribes it. And from there, I can throw it into ChatGPT to edit it, basically. But at least I'm like, I'm not cheating. It's actually me. Maybe, the AI is editing it, but they're not writing it. I don't know. It's still going so slow because I redo it a bunch of times. I don't like it. And then I change the structure. And I guess I don't dedicate enough time to it. But one day I'll finish it.
Yeah. Well, let me know when it comes out. I'll read it. It'll be good.
All right, Wyatt. What else should we be talking about? It seems like we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we did. We covered a lot. I mean, anybody's out there that's just listening to this that hasn't started yet, it's like, you got to get going. Like, it's just, you got to take the action. You got to take the risk. One thing that I've learned is that are successful in life are often not the smartest people. They're actually dumb enough that they took the risk and they just stuck with it long enough. And so if you think you're smart, just get out of your own way, go start doing the thing. And if you actually are smart, then heck, you'll get it done even faster than everyone else. But go take the risk. If you need it, if you aren't investing in real estate and you're listening to the show, like, you obviously have some kind of a desire to be. So get involved with someone you trust, get educated if you need to, and go start making your dreams happen, because the present is the present. It is now.
Right. And if you've gotten this far into the episode, you must have been interested in what we have to say. But I love that. That's a quotable statement. Most successful people are dumb enough to take the risk.
It's true. Yeah. You see the A players. Yeah, a lot of the times you see the A players working for the A students working for the C students. And it's just because the C students are dumb enough to take the risk and stupid enough to believe that it's going to work out. And then for some of them, it does.
Exactly. Wyatt, thanks for being here. Nice chatting with you. What's your contact information? How does one get a hold of you?
Yeah, it's the easiest place is follow me on Instagram @Wyatt Buys Buildings, WYATT Buys Buildings. So put out a bunch of content on there for you guys. I have a YouTube channel, so you can go to Wyatt Simon on YouTube. Or if you're looking for, some more resources, you can go to wyattsimon.com. On there, I have a free deal analyzer tool, so you can pick that up for free. It's what I use when I run my properties, run my numbers on my properties. So try to be as resourceful as possible for everyone listening to this. Real estate development, legacy.